screen okay? Okay.
Good morning, Christine.
Good morning.
I'm Susan McBriarty.
It's good to see you. I
I
remember seeing you too. Yes.
I think the first time you came.
Yeah, it was. I was telling Dana, I was here in 2019 and did a much earlier version of this kind of work with you. And then I think I was back in 2020. I did Genesis, I think, and an Exodus thing. So I know, like pre-COVID, it's all a blur. I think everything's a blur. So yeah, so it's delightful to be back. Thank you for having me. Yeah. I know there are new folks too, so I'm not assuming anything. I should watch time. I'm very proud of you for that, actually. I am really proud of you. It takes courage. I'm really delighted. Good morning. It's lovely to see you. Thank you. It's good to be here.
Okay, let's get started. Before I introduce our speaker, I want to highlight that this is Russ's last swan song as the leader of the spiritual growth. And somehow he talked me into joining him last year, so now I get another 2 years of this.
don't.
But her research interests include Israelite and ancient Near Eastern Christian literature, the socio-historic and theological dynamics post-exilic period, short stories of Ruth, Esther, and Jonah, and biblical conceptions of moral health. She's got several books, several articles, several chapters of books, and she's been here before.
Yes.
She got her BA from Swarthmore. I always tried to get in there, but when I was going, they didn't allow men.
Oh, it's always been a co-ed school. It's always been co-ed.
And she got her MDB from Princeton and her PhD at Seminary. So I'll let you introduce what you're going to talk on rather than me, and then you change it. So.
Thank you so much, Rick. I appreciate that. Good morning, friends. It's delightful to be here this morning. Happy New Year. Happy 2026. Yes, I have been here before. I've had the distinct privilege of doing these January lectures previously. In fact, I did a wisdom series, although I expect none of you to remember any of it. So don't worry if you weren't here in 2019 when I first made an effort to talk about wisdom literature with you all. If you weren't here, never fear, I'm assuming nothing. The COVID years are a blur anyway, so it's probably good we talk about it all again anyway. I've since also talked with Alpharetta Presbyterian Church about Genesis. I think I've also studied Exodus with you a bit. So I am very familiar with these lectures and so incredibly grateful to be invited back. That's always a hopeful sign when you're welcomed back into the fold again. So thank you. Let me say also up front that I am here to be a resource for you. I do have a plan, but I also really want to be sure that I respond in real time to the questions and concerns that you may have related to wisdom or to whatever it is we're talking about. So rather than holding questions to the end, if along the way you would like clarification or for me to say a bit more, if you have a question, if you want to add something to the conversation, I hope you won't hesitate to just jump in. We are the body of Christ and all of its members, and so let's help together to stand together and study these materials. This week, it's less important that you have a Bible with you. Next week, you will want to have a Bible in your hand because we're going to be jumping around within, especially the book of Proverbs. And you'll want to be able to pay attention to the text in your own hands. Whatever translation is your preferred translation is perfectly fine with me. You're going to be hearing me use the New Revised Standard Version translation. That's the translation we use at Columbia Theological Seminary. It's widely used in theological education. But it's certainly not the only translation out there. So bring whatever Bible is nearest and dearest to your hearts, and we'll use it as part of our study next week. So what am I doing? I am here to explore a question with you, namely, what is wisdom? E.O. Wilson, I want to make sure I get the quote correctly. Does anybody know E.O. Wilson? I heard a yes. One of the most celebrated scientists, natural scientists of our time, who won a Pulitzer Prize for 2 of his books, one on human nature and the other on the ants. I believe he died maybe 15 years or so ago, served at Harvard University for a very long time. His quote, which I have thought about many times in recent days, is, quote, "We are drowning in information while starving for wisdom." We are drowning in information while starving for wisdom. I have found in my own work that this quote, a very wise quote from Dr. Wilson, resonates very much with our time. The requests that I receive for just these kinds of occasions. We're flooded with knowledge. We are far less adept at wisdom. And as you can imagine, the definitions of wisdom are complex and convoluted at times and contested. So the lens through which we're going to take up the topic of wisdom is that of the Bible, but most particularly the wisdom texts of the Old Testament. I'm going to say a lot more about what those texts are and how they work. And even more precisely, given that I only get 3 hours with you, we're going to use Proverbs or portions of Proverbs as a way into this question. So I'm coming at, I think, a very timely question, if not an urgent one, for our own time, but I'm coming at it from the perspective of biblical studies and our own faith tradition, biblically informed. So that's my work with you. Now today, we're going to spend time thinking about what is wisdom, the definitional question, and we're going to come at it a number of different ways to set the stage broadly for the more focused study of Proverbs in the next 2 Sundays. Any questions about what we're doing and where we're going? Those of you who were here in 2019, and I see a few of you, you will hear deep resonances of some of the work we did then. One of the things we do know about good pedagogy is that repetition is not a bad thing. So rather than make assumptions about what we all know or don't know, I'm going to start assuming fresh faces in the room and some renewed energy to take up the topic. I hope that is okay. So I'm going to begin, actually, before I switch the slide. One of the things that is true across wisdom texts in the Jewish tradition, starting in the Old Testament and then moving across time, is that they repeatedly refer to wisdom as a tree. The metaphor that they use repeatedly to describe this abstract concept of wisdom is that of a tree. Now, I want you to take a moment and think about what you know about trees. So we're trying to unplug, right? What is it that this metaphor is trying to capture about the nature of wisdom? Everybody got it? Take a moment, and I'm going to open up the floor, and you can speak into the silence. All right, you've got images of various trees up on the screen. You know the trees in your yard, the trees on your morning walk, the trees that you've nurtured, the trees that you've had to cut down, the trees that you have known from your youth, played in, swung on, climbed. When ancient Israel says to us, wisdom is a tree, what does that evoke for you? What are they saying about wisdom? Anyone? Deeply rooted. So this deep, deep foundations into the core of the earth. Cross-generational. Say a little bit more. What do you mean exactly by that? Yeah. So they persist through time in a way that generations of humans get to experience the same tree at different moments. Yes. They grow. So hopefully they grow. So there's an organic, right? This is a changing, living thing. Oh, fantastic. Okay, there's a lot there. There's both what is visually seen. We need to talk about that a little bit. And then there's also the hidden, the rooted system, for example, and some of the details of the tree itself, just to the naked eye. And then the second part was... Excellent. So growth also comes with the shedding of the old. Really, gosh, you're going to make this really easy. We'll be done today. Yes? They can look different. So there is an aesthetic edge to this that's important for us. It can look different. Trees look different depending on species, season, environment, the environmental conditions in which the tree is growing. Absolutely. Oh, beautiful. They communicate with each other. I am a Colorado girl, born and bred. When I picture a tree, I picture an aspen. But I don't just picture an aspen, I picture an aspen grove. And we know, not just aspen trees, which are all one organism, as you know, by a root system, but trees communicate with one another. So there's that deep-rooted system fuels a kind of connection and partnership, alliance, that enables the survivability of trees. What else? They weather storms. There's a resilience to a tree. I was really mindful of this earlier this week when the winds were coming in. We have a very tall tree in our front yard. And I marvel every time really fierce high winds come in, how the trunk stays so firm and there's just the slightest movement. But it withstands high winds, hopefully. But it withstands these high winds as storms come and go. There's a resilience to these trees. What else? They have memory. How so? Rings. So they record history within themselves. There's a recording of the time spent. Good. They provide fruit. Thank you. And shade. Excellent. You see a lot of reference, not surprisingly, in a largely desert culture in the Old Testament, to the shade of the tree as being a place of blessing. In fact, under King Solomon's reign, the hope was that everyone would be under their fig trees, enjoying their wine, right? Like this notion of abundance and health, enjoying the shade of a tree, enjoying the fruit of a tree. What else? Ah, yes, this is part of the resilience of them, right? They can have limbs chopped off. They can have trunks carved into and still find a way to survive. Yes? Excellent. So, and this all of this, as we'll see over the next few weeks, all of this applies to the wisdom tradition. Yes, so some trees we cultivate as a matter of practice. And our cultivation both generates new iterations of the tree, but also tends to its well-being and longevity. So too, there are trees that are fiercely wild, right? So there are trees that we simply enjoy and don't need to cultivate for them to flourish. Yes, please, in the back. That's okay. Yes. Excellent. So they grow into each other. Their branches sometimes do as well, but the root systems can grow into one another. Yes. Yeah, and what happens early in a tree's growth often can fuel that, right? Growing together, growing through each other. A tree's direction of growth can be directed in such a way. Lovely. This is getting back to the shade and the trunk. They serve as a residence for other creatures of the world. So you all know a lot about trees. That's clear. And as we were speaking into the air, kind of what this metaphor evokes, I hope you were in your own mind thinking, okay, how might this apply to wisdom? Wisdom is organic. Wisdom is living. Wisdom is rooted. Wisdom has resilience, withstands storms. Wisdom grows up and out and sheds the old as it is no longer needed. Wisdom is aesthetically beautiful and different. Wisdom is contextual. Certain trees grow in certain environments and they don't grow in other environments. Trees provide shade. They provide more than simply just their existence. They provide resources for the existence of others. Shade, a house in which to dwell, fruit. All of these, if I left any out, I know I did, but all of these have resonance when we think about the concept of wisdom. So right out of the gate, what I hope you're hearing me say is wisdom is not a fixed set of knowledge. Wisdom is not a set of universal moralisms. Wisdom breathes, changes, adapts, is specific to locale, and is a place of resonance and personal knowing and community well-being. through storms. I'll give an example. In the West Indies, at wakes, when there's been the death of a loved one, the community will gather to mourn, and they will use proverbs of their culture in order to speak order into the chaos. Why? Because proverbs are wise sayings honed over time, owned by the community again and again over time as speaking truth. And in the midst of the storm, they read each other what they know to be true. Proverbs, wise sayings, informed teaching. It doesn't in any way take away the grief, but it provides a point of reorientation and some stability amid the storm. Okay, now I'm going to take it another step. Of course.
Can you define for me using three analogies different information, knowledge?
So this is not a cop-out. It's going to feel that way. Let's not do it yet, because I think we're building to that.
I'm looking forward to learning.
I'll give you one example, and I forget who he's quoting, but David Brooks recently. David Brooks, the New York Times. Anybody read his op-ed? He writes a lot about wisdom, and I wish maybe I wrote it down. Hold on, I probably didn't. I did not. He had a quote about. In an op-ed probably a couple of years ago, forgive me, I'm paraphrasing, we can knowledge other people's knowledge. We cannot wisdom other people's wisdom. Let me say it again. That's a cheap paraphrase, but that's basically what it was. Knowledge can be written down, set of facts, book of Proverbs, and we can use that knowledge. You can use that knowledge, I can use that knowledge. That same resource we can use. The wisdom that you speak in a particular moment will not be the same wisdom that I speak, or it won't be heard the same or received the same. Wisdom is very much relational, interactive, and contextual. Is that, I'm starting to chip away at it.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get to more in a minute. We'll get to more. No.
Like I probably barely.
Well, here's the good news. I doubt that's true, first of all, but here's the other good news. The ancient Israelites would say, and I'll say this again next week and probably the third week too. Ancient Israel would say, the moment you say, I am wise, you're an idiot. Because baked into the cake of what it is to be wise is a profound sense of humility and openness to what's happening in real time. So in Proverbs, as an example, wisdom only is used once with a possessive suffix, your wisdom. In Hebrew, the possession of a thing is marked by a suffix on the end. Wisdom, the term, almost never, with one exception, has a possessive suffix on it. There was really the sense that one never fully possesses, acquires, holds wisdom. It is always beyond the one, right? You're always on a journey for it. The moment you stop seeking wisdom is the moment for ancient Israel. You die. It's a ceasing to be the hungry, eager one to learn. I don't know if that comforts you, but I hope it does. Okay, so here's the next thing. Ancient Israel doesn't just say, wisdom is a tree. Ancient Israel says, wisdom is a tree of life. Okay, now, think for a moment about where you've heard about the tree of life. In the garden. Okay, the first time we hear about a tree of life is in the Garden of Eden. Y'all remember Genesis 2 and 3? What happens to the tree of life in the garden? Bible quiz. It gets taken away. I'm sorry, Matt, you said something too. It's a test, right? So it's part of a test. You have all these trees. Every tree of every kind has been planted in this garden. You may eat of all of it, except for the tree that is in the midst of the garden. There are actually two trees, the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Both trees are set in the garden, so there's a little bit of ambiguity. But the tree of life is there. And there's concern after they eat from the tree of knowledge that they will eat from the tree of life. And so God makes the decision to expel Adam and Eve from the garden, lest they eat of the tree of life. So by the end of Genesis 3, can we get to the tree of life? Well, if you can get past a flaming sword and a cherubim, and if you can find the garden, right, which is a big question. So the tree of life, by the time we get to Genesis 3, is no longer available to the humans. It's cordoned off, it's blocked off. There's one other place in this Christian scriptures that you hear about the tree of life. Revelation 22. And how is it described there? Do you remember? Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, it's imaged. Now, both in Genesis and in Revelation 22, the tree is imaged related to water. So in Genesis, you remember there's a mist that covers the world, and there's water in the garden, just a spring that's bubbling up. And in Revelation 22, the tree is kind of bridging. It's arched over, its root system is arched over a river. It grows a different fruit every month of the year, and its leaves are healing for the nations. So it's a source of life, both sustenance and in terms of well-being, as imagined in Revelation. Now, here's the thing. In Genesis, the tree of life is blocked by a flaming sword and a guarding cherubim. Humans cannot access it there. Revelation 22, the tree of life, is the healing for all nations, but what stands between us and that is an apocalyptic end time. So thank you for the smile. Which means we can't just, maybe we don't want to go that far. It's cut off, an apocalyptic end time is the end of the world as we know it and a radical new beginning by God. Yes, there's no future hope in human history, and so the only way God can effect a change is to break history as we know it and effect a new time. In both senses, at the beginning of the canon and at the end of the Christian canon, the tree of life is not accessible to us, except for one place. In the book of Proverbs, Proverbs 3, we'll look at it next week, the tree of life is standing in the middle of the downtown, calling out that you would pay attention to her teachings. It's the only place in all of Christian scripture where the tree of life is readily available to those who seek her. So, this reference, this is the first time this is used, Proverbs 3:18. Wisdom is a tree of life. As soon as the ancient sages, ancient wise ones use that phrase, they're evoking the Garden of Eden. They're not yet, they don't have the book of Revelation yet, but they're evoking this mythological prehistory creation context and saying the tree that has been off limits to us is available through this concept of wisdom. And the tree of life has specific resonance in an ancient Near Eastern context, and this is why. Across the ancient Near East, not just in Israelite iconography or art, we find images of a tree. Ancient Egypt has a lot of these. Mesopotamia, we find these all over the ancient Near East. This is one image. This is actually an Israelite image of the tree of life from a shrine called Cantillet Ajrud, located in the north of ancient Israel, sometime in the late 9th to early 8th century. And this is, somebody drew this tree of life. What do you notice about it? It's got a zebra, kind of ibex, the kind of horned creatures. These are seen across the ancient Near East, probably an ibex, but striped. It's unfinished, so somebody was drawing and that clearly worked hard to kind of finish the tree and then worked out from there. I'm sorry? They're eating from it, so they're up on their, this is not unique to Israel, this is a common image of the tree of life. They're up on their legs, reaching to eat from it. What else? It's balanced. Look at the symmetry that's built into this tree. What else? These are both, that you can see the kind of sketch of the horn. These are both ibexes, so they're vegetarian creatures. It has roots. Yeah, if you've ever bought a tree, the root ball, you see it. The ancient Israel doesn't draw. If you ask a child to draw a tree, and they draw the roots kind of coming out like this, if you ask somebody to draw a tree in the ancient world, they draw the root system like this. Very common, like a root ball. What else do you notice? It's sparse, right? The branches are coming out, but what do you notice about the branches? It doesn't look like a tree perhaps in our neck of the woods. They're reaching up. So notice there is this, we talked about this sort of tree growing up and shedding that which it leaves behind. There's fruiting happening at the top of the tree. And there's flowering and fruiting happening at the ends of the branches. So what season are we in? Spring or summer, whenever this particular tree fruits. Whenever this particular tree is at its most abundant. The tree of life is imaged in this way as having many of the features you yourselves identified about trees, but specifically being at its point of greatest fruition, its point of growth, where it can best provide for the sustenance and well-being of the creatures around it. Okay, so as we move, we're going to move now into more material about the sort of defining wisdom, but I want you to hold, because we'll come back to it again and again over the next couple weeks, I want you to keep this image of wisdom as a tree, and most particularly as a source of life for those who come and feed, hold fast. You'll see in Proverbs 3, the command to those who are seeking wisdom is to hold fast, right? Like cling to the tree. Cling to the tree of life so that you might be happy is the phrase that's used. Ashrei in Hebrew. Ashrei means to be, to receive fortune, to be blessed. In some ways it's like a blessed is the one who holds fast to wisdom. This is a fortunate or blessed way of thinking of the relationship of a person with happiness. Okay. So let's talk about what it is. Remember, we're asking the question what it is, and I'll watch our time. I know do some people still need to leave a little early for? Okay, good. All right, so friends, I'm now moving from metaphor, what is wisdom? Wisdom is a tree. Wisdom is a tree of life. And now I'm moving into other ways of thinking about the concept of wisdom. And I'm going to start by saying, well, when you say what is wisdom, and we acknowledge, as those who study Proverbs and wisdom literature across cultures acknowledge, is that every culture has a wisdom tradition. Every culture has a wisdom tradition. Sometimes those wisdom traditions are largely oral. They're passed down generation to generation by speech. In fact, our own wisdom tradition often functions this way, even if we eventually have written traditions. So can any of you remember the first time you heard a proverb? Probably not. And probably because you first heard it from a parent speaking a proverb to you. What are some of the proverbs you remember as a child? Or that you've used with your own children? Or your own grandchildren, or your nieces or your nephews, or the children of other people, which is usually when it's shocking. Spare the rod, spoil the child. That's actually biblical. That's in Proverbs. A version of that. We'll talk about it. What else? Haste makes waste.
Make haste slowly.
Make haste slowly?
Make haste slowly.
Make haste slowly. That's good. Others? Be careful what you wish for. These are biblical. You're just pulling right out of Proverbs. teach the boy or teach the child the way he shall go. Yeah, good. So notice too, as we're doing this, sometimes you only need to say the first half of a proverb, and everybody's like, yep, got it. Right? Well, the first half functions as the cue for the whole thing. Other examples. Do unto others. Right? But as soon as you say do unto others, everybody knows, as you would have them do unto you. What else? Bird in hand is worth two in a bush. Never quite understood what that meant, but there it is. What else? A rolling stone gathers no moss. We're going to come back around to exactly that proverb the third week. Thank you. I will pay you later. A rolling stone gathers no moss. Stitch in time saves 9. Again, you feel like you need to know needlework to completely appreciate the fullness of the proverb, but there it is. Any others? Early to bed? Excellent, right? So this is how Proverbs work. And usually we hear them, we experience them in our youth well before we have any sort of cognitive awareness that they're a proverb. It's also the case that when we become parents or elders, grandparents, aunts, uncles, we will use a proverb in a moment, not even knowing why we said it. Have you ever had that experience? I had this with my niece, and like all of a sudden, proverbs come flying out of my mouth, and I have no conscious thought of choosing to say that proverb at that time. It just fit. Proverbs have a kind of durability, a persistence over time that serves a community well. And that's how they become a proverb, as opposed to simply a really wise thing somebody said once. Proverbs get used and reused and learned in such a way that we only need the first line. Now, in many cultures, wisdom traditions get written down eventually. What's largely an oral expression gets in written form. This is true in the ancient Near East, and it's a whole separate conversation as to when they start writing it down, and I'm happy to have that conversation, but maybe not in this moment. What we know is what we have available to us are many ancient Near Eastern texts, wisdom texts. When I'm working in Proverbs, for example, I have open on my desk most days ancient Egyptian wisdom texts, ancient Mesopotamian wisdom texts, ancient Sumerian wisdom texts. Because there are lots of resonances across these communities in terms of their wisdom tradition. In fact, I'll say this again and again, this is one of the most, if I can use the word, ecumenical endeavors in the ancient world, was the sharing of wisdom. Everyone realized we benefit from learning the wisdom of other cultures. And there's a theology that drives that. God created everyone. God created the whole world. Why would we not benefit from learning from people who are living in another part of the world? We'll talk more about that theology in a minute. Now, so what I want you to know is that ancient Israel goes about its work of crafting a wisdom tradition within a much broader intercultural dynamic of sharing wisdom traditions. When I say as a biblical scholar or as a Christian believer, what are the wisdom texts? So when it gets written down, how has Judaism, how has Christianity with its canon preserved a wisdom tradition? We talk about the 3 books of Proverbs, Job, and Ecclesiastes. Okay, 3 weeks is not enough time for us to parse. What do you do with those 3 books all being in the same tradition? Think about Proverbs. Think about Job, its own incredible masterpiece, and think about Ecclesiastes. Very different
books, but held together by this they're all sages, they're all wisdom seekers. I'll say more about that as we get further in. You will also sometimes hear people talk about wisdom psalms. There are some wisdom. Psalm 1 is considered a wisdom psalm, but we don't, it's sort of a chicken and egg question. Does a vocabulary that sort of resonates with wisdom make it a wisdom text? Sorry, these are questions that are asked in this little tiny corner of the universe in which I live, trying to make definitional answers to these questions. But long story short, there are Psalm 119. There are psalms that resonate with wisdom language and concerns. You will also sometimes, if you buy a sort of intro to Israelite wisdom literature book, you'll sometimes see a chapter on the Song of Songs. Any hunches about why it might be considered a wisdom text? Any thoughts? So some see it as sort of a metaphorical, the love relationship between the two characters being a metaphor for the relationship between God and Israel, or God and the individual believer. The most obvious reason is that Solomon is a figure in the book, is named in the book. And Solomon wrote many songs. So this is sort of, it's almost a historical reflex to say this is a wisdom text. I myself don't categorize Song of Songs as a wisdom text. It's a love poem, and that's its own distinct genre in the ancient world, and Israel wrote a masterful one. The Song of Songs, the songiest of songs, that's what it means. The best love song ever. You have to have me back if you want to talk about that. Okay, so I don't group Song of Songs as a wisdom text, although there's no question we learn a lot from it about love and the relationship of the believer to God. Within the deuterocanonical materials, our Roman Catholic brothers and sisters, Eastern Orthodox brothers and sisters claim these texts as also being wisdom texts. You'll notice here Wisdom of Solomon. Again, we're going to talk about Solomon as being the quintessential sage of ancient Israel. So his name gets affixed to texts that are clearly not dated to his time of rule, but become a kind of marker of authenticity and authority in ancient Israel for the wisdom they provide. We will briefly, next week, I hope, dance a little bit into Sirach, Ben Sira, and Wisdom of Solomon, so you hear a little bit of how this tradition develops out. So, what is wisdom? It's a tree. What is wisdom? It's a tree of life. What is wisdom? It's a tradition and family of texts. Everybody with me so far? There's an outline. Okay, next, it's a worldview. So it's a text, it's a group of texts, it's a tradition, and it's a tradition that's bearing a particular kind of worldview. And here it is. The wisdom tradition, of all the traditions that are preserved in the Old Testament, the wisdom tradition is the tradition that begins by asking what is good for the human in life. Okay, so there's a couple things here I want you to notice. What is good in life? That's the question. And what is good for the human? The category of the human being, the moral person, is fundamental here. There is not yet distinctions between national identity, party identity, gender, none of that. It's starting from the category of the human. What is good for the human in life? And to answer that question, what ancient Israel does, what wisdom does, is it watches the world. And it says, I'm going to value experience as a source of wisdom. I'm going to believe that everyday, ordinary interactions are a wellspring of ways we learn and gain wisdom. Okay, this is different. Notice what this tradition is doing is it's valuing our everyday, ordinary life as a source of revelation. Let me make the distinction so you see how serious this is. You're all like, yeah, Christine, I get it. Here's why it's so important. Other traditions woven into the Old Testament say revelation comes from God on Mount Sinai, comes from above. God hands us a set of commandments, and we are to live in covenant with God by those commandments. Revelation comes from above. This is yes. And revelation comes in the everyday messiness of our ordinary lives. It's both. This is the tradition that says what you do in the marketplace, what you say at your dinner table, how you engage your neighbor, how you use your voice, when you use your voice, how you tend to the sick and the marginalized and the widowed and the orphan. All of that is revelation and teaches us something about what it is to be wise. So it values experience as the source of learning. And this is why Proverbs gets this the most. This is why Proverbs, for example, is often seen as just kind of practical, everyday, ordinary know-how. This is just ordinary stuff. Okay, when we say it's just ordinary, everyday wisdom, what happens is we don't preach it, we don't teach it very often, right? Because it doesn't seem particularly distinct to Israel. It doesn't seem particularly distinct to the covenant of Moses, right? It just feels like this is, yeah, we should all know this stuff. Ancient Israel would say, that's exactly right. For ancient Israel, every experience of the ordinary everyday is an experience of the divine. And every experience of the divine is experienced in the messiness of the ordinary everyday. So you can't, unlike our contemporary culture where we uncouple the sacred and the secular, ancient Israel says, oh, no, they're all the same thing. So how you act, what you say, the relationships you hold, they all bear witness to the God you worship. And God's leading in your life is born out of those same relationships, those same interactions. So said differently, ancient Israel understands practical know-how as part of witnessing the extraordinary in the ordinary. Okay, now I added this morning when I was looking at my notes, drawing from experience and attending to loves and emotions. We're going to see in Proverbs when we move into it, there is a lot of concern in these texts for dispositions and emotions. In fact, the question that Proverbs 1-9 is going to ask us next week, most piercingly, is what is it that you love? And what is it that you actively work to dismantle? What is it that you love? The directions of one's emotions, the objects of our affections, are front and center as a concern. Who is it? What is it? How is it that you love? And what is it that you are working your whole life to fight against? That carves a kind of moral posture in the self that the sages very much want to be a part of. Okay, any questions? I'm going to keep moving. Please. No. Can I put a pin in that because we're about to get there? No. The answer to your question is no. It is not specifically a human trait. Can I hold the punchline for a minute? Okay. It is not. So be anticipating this question in a minute. Wisdom, thank you all. It's like we all cued each other up. The Spirit worked, and we're all cueing each other up. So wisdom looks around at the world. This is a worldview, remember, and it's seeking some sort of order or coherence. I think you all have had the benefit of having a January series of lectures from Dr. Brennan Breed. Yes. Who I had the great privilege of teaching with for a number of years. And when Brennan, Dr. Breed, gets up and we're teaching wisdom at the seminary, he will get up and he will use this as the way to capture this sense of seeking order and coherence. He will say, and I just am shamelessly borrowing it from him, the way to think about this is to think about the toothpaste commercials where they say 4 out of 5 dentists recommend. 4 out of 5 dentists recommend, I don't even know which toothpaste brand it is. It's chewing gum? Sure. Whoever it is. And whoever these 4 dentists are, 4 out of 5 dentists recommend we use this chewing gum or this toothpaste or this dental floss, whatever it is. What they are seeking a kind of, we all generally agree that this is the dental floss you should use. This is the bubble, this is not the bubble gum, this is the dental gum you should use. And they make a recommendation. They're seeking a coherence. Now, there's the 5th dentist who's like, absolutely not. The better gum is over here, right? So these recommendations, this coherence, this order that the sages are seeking isn't universal. Not everybody's going to agree about it. But 4 out of 5 times, it works. You all hear it? So it's not, remember again, these aren't universals. These aren't fixed. This is the best we can offer out of our lived experience. 4 out of 5 times, this is the way forward that seems to work the best. Everybody got it? We're going to talk more about structure and coherence next week because there's a lot of implications for this. But what I want you to see is they're looking for patterns. And in other cultures in the ancient world, the sages had a practice of seeking patterns by watching birds in flight. Studying the human liver. It's more than you want to know. Studying the human liver and parsing the ways in which the liver is shaped. Animal livers, I should say. Excuse me, did I say human livers? Animal livers, in order to perceive how. So there were ways of seeking this kind of coherence and order in the world that may seem very odd to us, but I suspect most of us are trying to do the same thing in our own lives. Most of the time when I do this, it has the desired effect. That can become the seed of a wise saying or a wise proverb. Okay, so let's move to what are the sources of such wisdom? I'm mindful of our time. And I said humans are not the only source, but let's start with humans as the source. When you think about wisdom and your sources, your own sources for wisdom, what are they? Where do you go? Books? Parents? I hear parents. Experience, your own experience or the experience of others or both? Both. Teachers. Friends, sometimes friends have great wisdom. Nature, okay, we're going to get there. Observation, so what you're perceiving is happening in the world or paying attention. Okay, for time, I'm going to do this. For ancient Israel, there are several key sources of wisdom. The first is the elder, and that can be a number of ways. You've named parents, teachers, mentors, professors, pastors, elders. Gray hair is a crown, according to Proverbs. Why? Because the person who has gray hair has lived a full life. Now, what is this telling us? The elder is a source of wisdom. The elder has lived, right, has navigated the everyday ordinary and survived. The elder has suffered and has found a way to make life even amid and after and during suffering. So there's a resilience in the elder. The elder has seen a lot of the world and a lot of life and has had plenty of opportunity to test the theory 4 out of 5 as they're navigating every day.
The same thing about those who are balding
They don't have a thing about balding. But this notion that the elder, that's the first place you go is to the elder. I find that really, we all kind of nod our heads, especially those of us who have gray hair or getting gray hair. We nod our heads, but we live in a culture that absolutely venerates youth and refuses to really benefit, lean into, hunger for, study the wisdom of elders. And that is, the ancient Israel would say to us, that is to our detriment. We are losing hard-fought wisdom by not accessing, not honoring, not valuing the wisdom of those who have survived life. So elders, artisans, craftspeople. If you're an artist, you might appreciate this very much. For ancient Israel, the metal worker, the shipbuilder, the wood crafter, the weaver, anyone who works with their hands and crafts a thing for utilitarian purposes or for beauty all by itself, or both, that is wisdom. It's a skill, it's a craft. It's the ability to take a thing and make a new thing. That's wisdom. Now to come back around. Is wisdom only a human characteristic? No. A third major source of wisdom for ancient Israel is the natural world. So, we have what we call a set of proverbs called "Go to the Ant," and it's perhaps not surprising that E.O. Wilson, who I quoted at the very beginning, the book that really first put him on the stage was his book about ants. He was a world-famous expert on the life of ants. I can't tell you much more than that about ants, but that he was. And we have, when we study wisdom literature, when we think about all the ways in which the sages draw on the natural world to teach about the characteristics of wisdom, we group all of those sayings under this category of "go to the ant." And where that comes from is in Proverbs 6. Here's the instruction. And then I want to ask you, as you're hearing the instruction, I want to ask you afterwards, what is it we're supposed to learn from the ant? You ready? Go to the ant, you lazy bones. This is NRSV. Consider the ant's ways and be wise. Without having any chief or officer or ruler, the ant prepares its food in the summer and gathers its sustenance in harvest. How long are you going to lie there, O lazy bones? When will you rise from your sleep? A little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty comes upon you like a robber. Okay. What am I supposed to learn from the ant? Go to the ant. Consider its ways and be wise. It's industrious. How so?
Well, they've built themselves this incredible subterranean home, and they all work together and always work.
They always work, okay. Planning for the future. How so? Yeah. So there is in this ant, there's industrious to this ant, there's this, in the ant, like think of an ant. An ant. This ant, the tiniest of creatures, has a sense of time. The ant knows that in times of abundance, you gather because there will be seasons of scarcity. You have to have reserves. The ant knows this. The ant knows this. So the collective does this, and here's the remarkable thing. Did you catch the first phrase? Without a chief or a ruler, without anyone telling them it's time to gather, they do it anyway. Okay, I want to underscore that in the book of Proverbs, there are only two texts that imagine a world where you don't need a chief or a ruler or a king. The ant doesn't need one. The other place which is another go to the ant proverb, and I'm going to share it briefly. I know I'm aware of our time. Proverbs 30, at the other end of the book. Hear this. 4 things on earth are small. I'm in Proverbs 30, verse 24 and following. 4 things on earth are small, yet they are exceedingly wise. The ants are a people without strength, yet they provide their food in the summer. The badgers are a people without power, yet they make their homes in the rocks. The locusts have no king, yet all of them march in rank. And the lizard can be grasped by the hand, but it's in the king's palace. What are you noticing about that? The locusts don't need a king to all fly. And the other beautiful thing about this go to the ant proverb is, did you hear the badger is a people, the ant is a people, the lizard is a people? This particular sage blends the human and the non-human world and says we're really more like creatures, friends, than we will ever be like God. So we can benefit from, we do benefit from the dignity and integrity and knowledge of the smallest, exceedingly small creatures who bear with them wisdom. So part of what observing the creaturely realm is learning from creatures what it is to be a creature of God. Made by God, formed by God. Okay, how are we doing? Not quite done with sources. The last thing I'll say, I'm aware we're at time. And this always happens. I'll go 1 more minute. I'll say one more thing, but I'll do my best. The last source is, and we've already mentioned this, turning and seeking the wisdom of other cultures and communities around them. So you might remember King Solomon, who is the paragon of the wisdom tradition for ancient Israel. At the very beginning of his reign, people came from all over the ancient Near East in order to sort of see if he was as good as they said he was. Queen of Sheba comes. She'd heard about his wisdom. The Egyptian sages and scribes come to see King Solomon in order to see if he's really as wise as he says. We know, I'll say more about this in Proverbs, we know some of the sub-collections within the book of Proverbs have resonance, or we're not sure about the borrowing, who borrowed from whom first, but they're borrowing from Egyptian wisdom, for example. Now, they don't just borrow and drop it in, right? They say, oh, that wisdom tradition in ancient Egypt makes great sense to me. I need to translate it. I need to translate that truth into something that makes sense in my own culture. So we might not use this exact same vocabulary, the exact same metaphors, but we nonetheless translate that speech so that the truth can be heard in both cultures. Y'all hear it? So there is a profound appreciation for the fact that wisdom is at work in every culture, and that we benefit as we develop our own wisdom tradition from learning from the sages of others. Okay. Last thing, so we'll finish this slide. The wisdom literature, just if you think alone about Proverbs, Job, and Ecclesiastes, so just those 3 books, the wisdom tradition is remarkably diverse. And there is a great variety of forms and styles of speech. Everything from a 2-line proverb, which we'll talk about, to better than sayings, to commands, to prohibitions. You have all sorts of kinds. Happy are those who, beatitudes. You have all sorts of forms of speech and varieties of speech that lend themselves to the wisdom tradition. Part of what happens across the book of Proverbs is that one learns how to use different forms of wise sayings more adeptly. You get exposed to more, the book gets more complex, and you're able to adapt and absorb more variety in how it is you share the wisdom tradition. Here's the thing I want you to hear out of all of this. If you think a proverb is a simple thing, you are wrong. Proverbs are short, yes. Many of the Proverbs are short. Many of the Proverbs are easily memorizable, yes. But no proverb, I'll make this argument, you have to come back. I'll make this argument later. But no proverb has one meaning. And one way you can think about that immediately is how a proverb, when spoken, it depends on who says it, when they say it, how they say it, the tone of voice in which they say it, whether they linger over certain parts of it. It's all in real time how a proverb is used and received. We're going to do a little bit of experimentation with that in the next couple weeks. Y'all hear it? So proverbs seem to be on their face simple speech. Beautiful, exquisite simple speech. Easily memorizable. But in use, they become incredibly complicated. So this gets back to your question. What's the difference between knowledge and wisdom? Knowledge and information and wisdom. We can all look at the same proverb, but how we use it will say a lot about the wisdom we bring to use of that knowledge. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So it seems with the ant just knows. So whether that's, what's that? It's hard-coded. It's hard-coded into their DNA. They know because they know. And, they can't not do it. Could be instinct, intuition. It's just, it's baked into who they are. Part of what's interesting, last night I promise, part of what's interesting about Genesis 2, this whole how we come to know good and evil, uses some of this same, a scholar that both Dr. Breed and I have benefited a lot from over the years, Dr. Carol Newsom, talks about humans as having the hardware of a creature and the software of the divine. So like we're this sort of odd conflation. The human, by having some sense of moral categories, good and evil, we are like this, we have the software of like the deities, the gods, but our bodies are creaturely bodies. And so Genesis 2 is sort of playing with that. We are creatures, and we're not God, but we're something in between. We have some access to something in between, using that same play on what's hard-coded into us and what's accessed by us in the Garden of Eden. So more on that one next time. Carol Newsom, retired from Emory, fantastic scholar and teacher of wisdom. Friends, please come back next week. There's a lot more to do. But so grateful and so thankful to be here again. Thank you.